I'm really excited to share this presentation. I wouldn't say it's a talk. I basically have been dying to create a tutorial that was a speed run to create businesses, to get the things like databases, Stripe integrations, and just a basic website up and running as quickly as possible. So I tried a different format for this particular talk, and it's going to be mostly copy-paste. I apologize, I'm not going to go into details about the Stripe SDK, for example. I'm just going to be copying and pasting things. But I wanted to share it in this format because this is kind of, like I said, it's a beginning journey for me personally to create and collate a lot of these patterns. And I called it a pattern language for JavaScript. I'm not familiar. Is anyone familiar with a pattern language or that book from the 70s? It was essentially a civil engineering manual that talked and broke down city planning and communities and how you grow them into little patterns, basically, to-do lists. Everything from how how large a city needs to be to where you should face the windows of your bedroom for a better society. It was a really interesting book, but it has a lot of implications. But the format of it was essentially this idea where you have a bunch of patterns and then you yourself compose them for the end result. So we're going to go through this really quickly. And like I said, I created this site so it would be both a tutorial and also the script for this talk. But then I also added the ability to live comment. So if you click on the link there, the website is instantenterprise.vercel.app. If you click on the link at the top, you can just add comments. And that's really just to keep me honest. A lot of these patterns I'm going to show are very opinionated. They're the shortcuts I use in the projects that I create, but if you have better ideas or other libraries or things to swap out, please leave a comment and let's see how that goes. All right, well, without further ado, some of the things this does not, I put a disclaimer at the top, but some of the things this won't cover is security, optimization, testing, the real stuff that turns software into production-ready software. So the app we're going to create, let me see if I can get my screen here. It's going to be called Netflix. And we'll start with, we'll start copying some code. So let me zoom in here a little bit. Copying these scripts, I should say. First thing we'll do is create a next app. We'll call it Netflix and go through all the standard stuff. I won't create a repo or a Vercel login. I normally do that right from the get-go because of the environment variables. And it's so easy to kind of put them in one site and then have everyone who's on the team pull down those environment variables. But I won't go through that right now. Let me cd into Netflix and open it up. Good, so we've got it all nice. Let's get a couple environment variables in there. I think we should only need 4 total, including the next auth one. So this assumes you already have a Stripe account. Sorry, that's really bright. Feel free to copy these. Here's a link, the link to create the key. Again, what I'm trying to demonstrate more so is that if you've got 20 minutes and you need to create an app, you can do it. And it needs to collect payments and you need to, sell access to anything. You can do it within a short amount of time. From auth, from those first setup steps, we'll go to auth. Let me see where we're at with the folder structure. We've got our, great. Good, that added. Let's add some middleware. This is next auth middleware. Basically, sits in front of all the routes. You decide which ones you want protected. In this case, we're going to protect one called admin, and I'll show in a little bit. That's going to be the route that allows you to create a product on Stripe, for example. Let's create the next auth route as well. So it's going to be an API route, and it's going to be under the auth, and then it's going to be a catch-all route with Next.js. I won't go into many of the details about Next either. I feel like there's a lot of material these days. And I did want to call out quickly, let me just copy this over, something that I've seen on Twitter or x.com or whatever, how the format that one particular user has been sharing his snippet videos. And I liked it so much that I actually shoved it here into the appendix. So I'm not sure, raise your hand if you've seen these videos by Alex Sodorenko. I guess no one has. But essentially it's this format of almost like what I'm doing here, except reverse, where he's able to show concepts. In this case, he's talking about Next.js, but I loved the way that it was basically showing the migration patterns from a previous version of Next.js and a new one, where he was simply doing these transitions of code. I thought it was beautiful, and if you're an educator, regardless of JavaScript, I think this pattern for teaching code is really powerful. And that's kind of why I literally went through and copied all of his tweets. I thought they were going to be far better than any kind of summary of the features, anything better than the docs, or not better than docs, but anything else would have been lesser. Anyway, going back to the project, we've got our middleware, and we've added a bunch of that next auth middleware, a lot of the stuff to just remove and sanitize the token. Now we're going to, on the route itself, on the server rendered route, delete all this goodness. We're just going to read that session server and confirm. I'll just actually copy all this. In this case, we're just going to read the session and confirm that we got this working, have somebody logged in. Let's test this out really quick. We don't have any users, so this should just work. Oops. Okay, that didn't redirect, but that's where we are. We're now logged in. Okay, so now let's create and set up a database. In this case, this is just going to create a few things for us to have fake data. And the reason I do this at the beginning is because I feel like a lot of the best way for designing a product or the UI of a product is being able to manipulate the schemas of the database as quickly as possible. So we can work with SQLite or some of the others, but if we have access to Docker and we can just create a quick Postgres, that's probably the way to go. That's what I'm going to do here. I'll add these dependencies. I'm going to add Prisma, which will allow us to create that GraphQL schema that also generates the ORM for us with TypeScript, as well as the interfaces, and then a .env so that we can read from the development local rather than the .env that Prisma requires, and then Faker so we can seed some data. Once that's done, we'll initialize Prisma. We should now have this Prisma schema. I'm sure if you've worked with Prisma in the past, this is nothing out of the ordinary. We're going to basically create a user and a product model inside of this schema, and then play around with that inside of the Postgres database that we're about to create. So we'll create a Docker compose that's going to just allow us to spin up a quick Postgres. And in one, let's see, we have, in this one here, we'll start that up. Oops.
It's in the Prisma directory.
Oh, thank you. Pair programming. Thanks. That's one of those that probably would have taken 5 minutes, by the way. An hour, who knows? Okay, so we've got a database running. If we want, we can go ahead and test this out, but just in the sake of time, I'm going to grab the URL of that database and put it inside of our environment variables, go back to the Prisma, and make sure I change this back to Postgres rather than just database URL. Nothing out of the ordinary, but now I'm going to create my first model for that Postgres database, which is going to be the user. And at this point, everything's kind of set up for Prisma, and what I'm able to do is generate that schema, generate the migration scripts, generate the migration code as well. So I'll do that here. And then these scripts are going to just allow me, again, these are my own kind of shorthands, but what it allows me to do is I'll just dbgen will let me generate the Prisma client. dbmigrate will migrate it to the database. And then DB Studio is a kind of a utility from Prisma that's just going to carry a little GUI that I can look and inspect the database. So we should see users here. We haven't added any yet, so let me do that quickly. To do that, I actually need the client, the Prisma client that was generated. So I'm going to create a library folder, and then in that I'm going to put Prisma. So good, we've got Prisma working. And then I'm also going to add a seed script there. UtahJS, yes. And then I'll add a seed script to the package.json. And once this is all set, this is kind of the ceremony you have to do with Prisma, but again, this is far better than waiting weeks of tickets with backend engineers to change the schemas. But I'm just going to do dbgen, dbmigrate, which is going to take this new migration, save it to the folder, and then we'll start up that GUI again. Whoops, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay, let's start up that studio once more. Great, we've got our new friends, Liatha, Mariana, and Frida. So let's log out of here really quickly. We've updated the auth in one of the copy and paste, and I didn't walk through it, but just to prove that out, let's go to the guest, and I'm going to copy this email here. The passwords aren't encrypted at this point. There we go. Oops. Let me make sure I am logging in correctly here. Oops. All right, I hope this works. Okay, let me keep on going. Let me at least share the rest of the code. Oh, I'm sorry. This should have been replaced. Okay, I'll come back to that. I think it's going to be changed once we get into the creation of the individual Stripe customers. Okay, so the next step would be, we'll come back to that, to the authentication. The next step would be to add Stripe to the project, and then add a Stripe client. This next page, this next little bit is going to be quite a bit of copying and pasting and kind of just zooming through the Stripe bit. But let's see how far we can go. I'll create again, I mentioned a client for Stripe. And I'll add and modify the schema of the users so that there's a column for their Stripe ID. And then what we're going to do is now when someone logs in, if this ID is null, it'll go to Stripe, create that, and put it back into their user record. And this was the piece I was missing from the authentication. So should work on the order. You can see I'm ignoring some of these TypeScript errors as well. Really. All right, so we've updated the schema. We added the Stripe ID to it, and now we have to again go through that same song and dance just like we did when we updated the schema to include users, which is the generation, the migration, and then the startup of the studio once more. Let's see this once more. That was a step I missed. Cool. Everything should be working. Let's try to test what I was doing earlier, which is if I have the Stripe SDK working. Are there tissues, by the way? There are not. I don't know. Sorry, guys. Let me confirm that the authentication, or sorry, the Stripe integration is working. So we're going to grab a user who's a guest here and log in as them for now. And now that we've changed the authentication, what it should do is check for the user in the database and do the logic I just mentioned. Check whether or not they have a Stripe ID. And if they do, okay, so the redirection's not working. Let's check to see if her membership was changed. Her membership was not changed. Okay, so we're currently not changing the membership, but we are adding a Stripe ID. So that's good enough for the login. That'll help us kind of continue on. Now we need to create a product, and as I mentioned, that's going to happen. An admin user will do that. So let's go ahead and add that same model for a product to our database. Do the same song and dance. And then studio. Cool. That doesn't do anything to the database, but it did change the schema. So now we have products, and they're empty. All good. And at this point, we need an API to kind of gather some of the common functions we're going to be calling Stripe with. So this one I'll call API. I'll add this to our little Stripe folder. And that is the API that's going to create the product. And then in this case, I'm going to introduce, I'm sure y'all have, if you're familiar with the next kind of landscape, they're introducing this concept of server actions, which in my mind feels like a step closer back to PHP, to where we were 20 years ago. Honestly, it feels really comfortable to write logic like this. So just to give an example, I'm going to create a folder called actions, and then I'm just going to collocate that kind of actions inside of this whole Stripe folder. So actions, again, are really just like they're not route handlers or API handlers per se, but they're the ones that are essentially taking form data from the client and then running some functions in the server. I like the API. I think it's been really fun to experiment with. So let me see if I've got that saved correctly. Stripe actions, okay. Great. I might have some extra code here. This requires, by the way, that we go into next and turn on server actions. A lot of their tools don't work with server actions. Now, we're going to create a component. This component is essentially going to be the create product. It's just going to be a form. But just to show kind of the markup and how it's different from React client components, this is going to be a server component that consumes that action that I just created. So let me create that inside of a new components folder. Groovy, that's there. Now that was a server component. We need to add that server component to an actual server page. So this is the home page. Let me add it to an actual admin page, as I mentioned before. So this admin page, again, is just a server component. You can tell quickly just to see the async, but it's got a create product here, and I'm fetching the session and then passing the user ID, the Stripe customer ID to create product. So it's a rather very simple form. It's rather dumb, but it works. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let's test out to see if I can change one of these users here. And if I log in as Luis76, because he's an admin, let me just see if the authentication is working correctly. I'll actually just start from admin so you can see the flow. So I hit admin and then it redirects me all the same. Again, I'm just grabbing this email because he's an admin user. The redirect's probably not going to work. Oh, it did work that time. Great, so here's our little form. This is the create product form that we just created here, this React component. And again, like I said, it's just a form with some hidden values for the Stripe customer ID and then a submit button. So I'm going to call this keep it at $99 and not do anything right there because we don't have a webhook or anything hooked up. Sorry, the default Tailwinds somehow added that gradient thing in the back on the light mode, but that's why I'm keeping this on dark. Let's add the webhook to do something whenever we create that product. Actually, if we wanted to, let's just test this first. Test that this backend's even working, or that the product could actually be created. I think we just created two. Yeah, we did. Cool. So what's important here, let's keep it, there we go. What's important here is that we've got these Stripe price IDs. So it did hit the Stripe API. By the way, I worked, preparing for this talk, I was hoping to do everything on a Docker and try to get Stripe mock and some of the other kind of like local APIs, but they won't let you mock the checkout session flow, which is kind of like the easiest way to get involved with Stripe. You just hand them this price ID, and then the user gets forwarded, like we'll see here shortly. But I really wanted to try to do everything inside of a kind of a local mock environment. So that'll be the next talk. And the goal being is that I don't want to have to rely on internet connectivity with Stripe to have to develop something in 20 minutes. Even though I know I'll need it later. So let's go confirm we've got the products. We've done that. I will log into Stripe quickly so we can get the webhook portion. And I'm going out of order here, but cool. And now I'm logged in. Let me add the script to the package.json that's going to let us start the listening server for the webhook. Let's go ahead and test that out. There we go. There's our secret. Let's add that to, oops. All right. And then we'll create, in that same Stripe folder, we'll create a webhook file, and then we're going to just import that into the next API route. And what that does is right here, we're going to get, when checkout session completed, we're going to call a method called update user that we'll grab from the API. As I mentioned, we're going to import this file into the webhook. That we're going to create. Oops. Let's see, we're going to update that API with that update user method I just mentioned. I just quit Visual Studio Code for fun. Look at that, back in business. Everything is now turned off. So let me run everything. Confirm that's working. Get our studio back up. Run the app again. Cool. All right, so we have our update user code in API, and lastly, we're going to have this checkout button, and this checkout button will basically modify the user record from guest into member. So I'll add that code to the API as well. The button isn't just going to do some on-click handler. The button's going to be, and this is another pattern that I grabbed from this whole server actions kind of activity that's been happening. But in this case, the button is going to be the form. And that form is going to take this checkout action that I'm putting inside of this actions folder with the create product action. And then let me import auth options from the next auth. So we now have the two products that we created with the Stripe ID. And I need to add that stripe to the home page. I see we're down to the wire on time as well. And I'm going to add to the home page that button, but again, like I said, it's a button that's wrapped in a form. So let's just add it here for now. It's going to take that checkout action that we just created. And again, this is rather than doing an on-click handle, this is a server-rendered thing. And the action, we're not shipping JavaScript essentially with all this markup here. I'm going to go back into and make sure that this page, rather than reading from the session, which I haven't fixed quite yet, haven't quite figured out how to revalidate the session. At the moment, I'm going to grab the user every time that this route is refreshed on cache from the database and confirm that they have the right role. Good. So with that all there, let's log out here, see if we've got a guest again, or let's try Eleanor. Sign out. In this case, I want to add to this page some code that says if I'm a member, add some premium content. Otherwise, if I'm logged in, I'm a user, just give me the form to subscribe to become a member. And if not, show me some marketing content. Let's see what that looks like here. Nice. Let's run our let's run this once more. Something's up with the Prisma. Okay, well, I won't try to debug this in front of you since we're over time, but I will just direct y'all back to the website, Instant Enterprise. I do think that we're in the middle of another web renaissance, that the web with all the tools that we have empower us to be productive and to make businesses that actually make revenue rather than just side projects and hobbies. And I encourage us all to be productive and to have the courage and confidence to try out new things. I gave this talk because after leaving JP Morgan, I went into the Web3 space, and I would go to these hackathons, conferences much larger than this, and everyone was coding. Everyone was coding, either Solidity or some of these other languages, but there was also a large community of front-end developers. And I just couldn't get over the fact that I felt like it was a massive waste of time. So I want to see a future where folks can use these types of tools and create businesses and commerce that are just as powerful as some of the stuff we saw in crypto. And hopefully the next 5-10 years will be a productive time for front-end engineers. Thanks, everyone.